Arguably the most controversial player to ever play the game, Sean Avery was loathed by many and loved by very few during his days in the NHL. But it was much more than just the usual cheap shots and dirty plays that made Avery naturally a villain on skates, but also his off-ice conduct, which was just if not more controversial. In this video, I'm going to go over the biggest jerk moments displayed by Avery himself throughout his career. And with that, here are Sean Avery's top jerk moments. During a regular season game in 2009 against the Vancouver Canucks, Sean Avery, while up to his usual pest routine, had officially gotten into the head of Shane O'Brien. While the two were verbally going back and forth behind the bench, O'Brien then quickly escalates the situation by jabbing his stick into Avery's torso multiple times. But before he could go any further, O'Brien's stick was snatched out of his hands by, you guessed it, Avery himself, who then threw it to the ice. Following the game, O'Brien received a one-game suspension for high sticking, but for O'Brien, getting his revenge was possibly worth every penny of the $8,290 in salary that he forfeited. Just saying. So if you know anything about Avery, you're probably aware that the forward was usually all talk, but when it came to dropping the gloves with a select few, he was nowhere to be found. And during a postseason match against the Washington Capitals also in 2009, that's exactly what happened. After having words with Russian netminder Semyon Varlamov, who, by the way, spoke very little English, Avery was confronted by the defenseman John Erskine. But instead of retaliating towards the blue liner after he was hit, Avery decided to take a jab at Varlamov instead, which conveniently happened en route to the penalty box with a ref escort. And as you would expect, following his misbehavior, he was promptly ejected from the game. During Avery's short-lived tenure for the Dallas Stars, while only playing 23 games for the club, he definitely made a lasting impression in Texas. But it wasn't for scoring goals, but rather the usual antics that earned him his reputation. And during a regular season meeting with the San Jose Sharks, Avery was most certainly on his game. After chirping back and forth with Jody Shelley while on the ice and later on the bench, Avery decided he was done talking and let his liquids speak for him. Forward, while standing behind the bench, sprayed Shelley from a distance, who also sprayed Avery in return. And yet another classless act, compliments of Avery while avoiding a fair fight. The incident took place during a regular season match against the Edmonton Oilers that quickly took a turn for the worse in the remaining period of play. Following a questionable hit by Avery on Colin Fraser along the boards, Schmid, who came to his teammate's aid, quickly challenged Avery. But instead of getting a fair fight, the defenseman was basically sucker punched before he could even blink by his opponent, who got a right hand in prior to Schmid even taking his gloves off. But for Avery, the fun didn't end there, as the forward made sure to leave his mark by instigating one last time with Ryan Whitney en route to the dressing room and sparking a full-out brawl before hitting the showers. Completely banana lands, I know. For a guy that was delivering cheap shots just about every game, Avery had a knack for getting away scot-free. And it was during the first regular season meeting against the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2010 that he did just that. Following an awkward puck battle with an official in the middle, Avery behind the play could be shown honing his inner baseball skills, as he took a couple two-handed swings at Maple Leafs defenseman Mike Komisarek. Avery did get a minor penalty, but the punishment arguably didn't come close to matching the actual offense in this case. During the fourth and final meeting of the season between the two teams, things took a dramatic turn in the final minutes before the buzzer sounded. In the middle of a stoppage in play, Avery, who tried to make it less obvious, did a bad job of making a subtle cheap shot on Tim Thomas look accidental. While the netminder, who was on one knee, Avery, then pretending not to see him, skated into Thomas with his stick. Thomas, who was visibly incensed, immediately charged after the forward to get his own retribution. Following a brief scrum between the two teams in result, Avery, who was escorted to the penalty box, was shown shaking his head in disbelief while still acting completely innocent.
I was stunned at first, like you're just stretching there and you look up and you see him and he's like, yeah, sure, I did it on accident. Come on.
Now, it's pretty obvious that games between interstate rivals, the New York Rangers and New York Islanders, can get pretty heated. But as far as Avery was concerned, during the final regular season tilt between the two teams in 2011, he took things to a whole nother level. Just as a forward was getting in position to take a routine pass from his netminder, Avery, briefly leaving his feet, shoved Haley into the boards at a questionable angle. Haley, who was visibly shaken, could be shown wincing in pain before being helped off the playing surface by his teammates. And yet again, Avery was only met with a minor penalty of 2 minutes. In one of the various incidents that Avery was fined for, this one, I have to say, was the most creative. I mean, launching water bottles at fans from the penalty box? Well, this was definitely an NHL first. Avery, who was obviously perturbed for being sent to the sin bin, decided to get resourceful and use any item that he could find to create havoc. But for his part in the act, Avery was fined $2,500 and his team $25,000. Ouch. Before his time with the New York Rangers, Avery spent several seasons playing for the LA Kings. And it was during that time, throughout a regular season match against the Arizona, or Phoenix Coyotes at the time, he decided his target in this game was on forward Mike Sillinger. After a brief tussle along the boards, Avery partially headlocking Sillinger throws him to the ice before taking multiple headshots on him while he was down. Avery, of course, was penalized but received no further disciplinary action in result. While facing probably his biggest rival, at least outwardly, Martin Brodeur, in the postseason, Sean Avery, as many players do in the playoffs, decided to up his antics just a little. During the second period, shortly prior to a Rangers goal, Avery could be shown standing stationary right in front of the Devils' netminder. Avery, with intentions of distracting Brodeur, was waving his stick and taunting the three-time Stanley Cup champ. After receiving the puck back into the zone, Avery scored, but with his success came a setback, as the Avery rule was quickly implemented league-wide shortly after, which prohibits players from intentionally distracting the netminder by waving his stick and results in an unsportsmanlike penalty. But leave it to Avery to create reason for this rule to even be there. Am I right? Following the series end between the two teams and the Rangers coming away with a W, Martin Brodeur decided that, for obvious reasons, he wanted to skip the team pest in the handshake line. Avery, of course, took no exception to this, and later, when asked about the incident, said, "Well, everyone talks about how unclassy I am, and Fatso there forgot to shake my hand, I guess." And possibly the most memorable Avery moment to date took place following a morning skate in Calgary, Alberta, shortly before the Stars were to play Jarome Iginla and the Flames. Avery, who reporters put in the spotlight in order to expand on previous comments thrown at the Flames captain, calling him boring, the forward quickly turned his attention towards another player instead. "I just want to comment on how it's become a common thing in the NHL for guys to fall in love with my sloppy seconds," he says. "I don't know what that's about, but enjoy the game tonight." Avery was referring to his ex-girlfriend Alicia Cuthbert and her relationship with Calgary's own Dion Phaneuf. Following the comments, Avery was suspended by the league indefinitely, but ended up serving 6 games before it was announced that the forward wouldn't be returning to the lineup. When questioned about his take on Avery's comments towards the relationship with his girlfriend at the time, Phaneuf said, "A very disrespectful comment, and the league took action, and I definitely agree with how they took action today." Regardless of the slander the couple received at the hands of the agitator, seemingly didn't affect their relationship as the couple married years later in 2013.